Welcome to Virtual for Real, the Rapid Pipeline podcast, where we talk about all things digital twins for the real world. I'm Max, your host, CEO, and co founder at DGG, creators of Rapid Pipeline. And my guest today is the amazing Jonathan Beals. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Really love being here.
For everyone that doesn't know Jonathan yet, Jonathan is solutions consultant at Adobe, and before that he was shepherding 3D DPC, digital product creation, at Nike for 10 years. So Jonathan, I'm really honored and pleased to have you here on the podcast and on the show. And can you tell us just a little more about your journey and what brought you to working in this field, working with digital twins?
Of course, I would love to. It's definitely very unconventional. I actually started my first year of college wanting to go into aerospace engineering and go that route. And I got into that industry and I love design. I was inspired by The Matrix and Lord of the Rings, and I love space. And I found a friend that was getting into game art design. And so I thought that was just a wonderful field to get into. And so I joined him in the college, roomed with him, and then actually pivoted and went into media arts. And so really focusing on doing 3D for films, commercials, visual effects, and those sorts of things. And then right after I graduated college, my first internship was actually with Adidas. And I had no idea that they were doing 3D or that these product companies had anything to do with 3D. And I absolutely loved my time working there. And it lasted a very short 6 months. And after that, I pivoted back into the commercial and visual effects world and was doing that work for so then I just by pure luck and timing happened to come across a 3D lead job at Nike. And so I jumped on it, landed the job, and then I became a 3D designer for global football. And I was immediately immersed into that world and loved every second of it. And I was creating cleats and working with all these incredible designers, doing a lot of stuff for Neymar and Ronaldo and just world-class talent out there with world-class designers. But at the time, we at Nike were really just focused on the 3D model component of it. And so we were really focused on creating the model, creating the 3D prints, showing it, feeling it, taping it up, doing those sorts of things. And we didn't even really have a material library at that time, which is a bit ironic because 4 years before, when I was working with Adidas, I was helping them create their material library. And so I thought that there was this massive, untapped, huge opportunity to completely blow up how we designed at Nike, going from just 3D modeling to get something to hold in your hands to completely visualizing photorealistically what the shoe or apparel could look like before it was manufactured. So a couple years into the journey, I pitched the idea of having a team that was really only focused on the material side of it and digitizing the materials, but not just the typical digitizing materials, but using 3D technologies to create new materials and using that to inspire new design. And so that was 9 years, 8, 9 years ago at this point. And after a lot of failure of trying to learn how do you speak the business language, how do you get VPs to buy into your story and get them to give you a lot of money to try this crazy dream, I finally found success. And so I had the first contractor under me, and then that eventually ballooned to a team of 20 and then 30 across design, production, footwear, apparel. We were really the entire end-to-end ecosystem of the design pipeline, and we touched everything. And it was amazing because historically, footwear and apparel groups are very separate, even within their silos of basketball and football, very siloed. And so we were able to bring everything together. And so we had a comprehensive tech stack. We had very similar workflows and file saving, storage, dams, everything in there we all shared. And so we were able to move so fast and we were able to shrink and grow based off the demands of the business and be extremely flexible. And so we just found extreme success in there. In fact, at the end there, we were generating over $50 million for the business just with our team of 20 to 30. So it was an incredible experience with my time at Nike. And now I'm at Adobe as a solutions consultant over AI and 3D, where I get to essentially do what I was doing at Nike and doing a lot of this business development and leading and being able to advise all these wonderful companies around me on how to effectively scale their groups using these technologies and how to have an impact and an ROI, because it is extremely technical as Max, right? It's not as easy as it sounds to implement. And so there's a huge gap in the experts here that have the experience to be able to shepherd these other companies around and leverage these learnings of what it actually does take to enable digital product creation at scale.
Amazing. Hey, thank you so much. And that's such an interesting story. On the last episode, we had Christian Sons, who was building not for 10, but for 9 years, DPC at Adidas, right? And it's very similar. Also, the fun thing is he started off working at Airbus, right? And actually in
Yeah.
aerospace. And it's really fun to see that your story starts with talking about aerospace and then ending up building something really amazing for fashion and apparel footwear. And so that material library, that is a topic that we hear reoccurring basically. And like I know like companies like Hugo Boss and so on, they're all having teams building these things, right? It's just amazing to see how much the industry has advanced in that space and matured over the past decade, right? Thanks to people like you who've seen it inside out, basically, right? I think you're in an amazing position now, right, to help others from your Adobe role, right? Solutions consultant. And yeah, last time we were also talking a lot about ROI and starting to see that already in the ideation phase, right? Like you said, it's like I can digitize materials of things that I have already at hand, but I can also create entirely new designs before I build anything or order any material. And that's like just one thing where 3D digital twins are so powerful. But before we talk more about 3D digital twins, I want to ask a more fundamental question and really, yeah, like your take as someone who has seen it inside out. What is a digital twin anyway? So sometimes we say virtual twins, we hear digital twin. What is a digital twin? What's a virtual twin?
Words matter, right? Words matter, definition matters a lot. And if we are using the same words, but we're meaning different things, then it can get really confusing, right? It's like using different metrics to build a rocket ship, right? If you use the US metrics and European metrics, that rocket ship's going to blow up, right? And so, like, that's something that I'm really passionate about of having these types of conversations and digging into some of these words and what they mean. So, to me, a digital twin is a live data connected digital replica of a specific physical asset, process, or system, right? So, the key part of this that I think is really interesting that we all miss is it stays synchronized with the real world counterpart through continuous sensor information, operational data, real time monitoring, those sorts of things. A virtual twin is an immersive simulation ready 3D representation of a physical asset or environment that merges the geometry, materials, physics with that same live data that comes from a digital twin. Just as a few comparisons here. So digital tends to be encoded in discrete machine readable form. So, right, binary data. Virtual is a simulated environment or an object that mimics physical presence. So digital data, metadata, it often tends to come through more through like interfaces through dashboards, queries, APIs, those sorts of things. And then virtual is much more interactive through 3D environments, simulations, avatars, experiences, that sort of thing. So to me, a virtual twin goes beyond that digital twin by not just mirroring that physical form, but also simulating its behavior and evolution in time. Now, I think the interesting part of all of this and its implication is that it means that a photoreal shoe, let's take footwear for an example, built off of data. So it represents the physical one to one in every measurable category. And it's a drawing or it's connected to it. It's a bomb. It's living. It has this information. Oh, that's a 3D model or whatever that vernacular is. And then we can get really clear on, oh, okay, that's a use case for this thing. That's the use case for this thing. When you say these words, this is everything that you mean by this and all the data that's associated with it. And then it really reduces the amount of confusion that happens and then we all can move faster and be able to connect to the APIs and data on the back end a lot more effectively. So definitely like much more of that immersive. And I think a big differentiation that I'm really starting to make in my head is it's really that physics connection and that it can provide this a true tangible experience that can feed really incredible future endeavors. And like in the footwear and apparel space, having a 3D photoreal mock-up of an apparel or footwear is incredibly valuable, right? Like you can put on your website, you can marketing, you can design, like incredibly beneficial. But I would argue that's only if you're just doing that, you're only getting 30% of the real value of that asset. If you're not connecting it to data and getting real-time analytics of how many people are buying it, what's the supply chain issues, where's that material source, what's the carbon score, what's all, if you're not getting all that, you're only getting the true 30% benefit. And this is a huge problem of why so many companies have such a hard time of getting an ROI on this, is because they truly don't understand the complexity and also the big benefit of this. And so
Oh
they
yeah,
stop at that 30% when they're missing. It's like that iceberg, right? They just see that top
exactly.
and they just see the visual stuff. I'm like, oh, this is cool. You can turntable, you can change colors, all amazing. But you're missing so much of it that actually gives you your return.
So you've seen so much like with Nike, but I suppose also with your clients now working for Adobe. And I'm just wondering, so you mentioned some examples already. So for these real world applications, where do you see like the most potential, and how do these experience shape the way things work today? And maybe also how can Adobe help their clients? So what's the Nike point of view? What's the Adobe point of view in a way on the topic?
Yeah, wonderful questions. And being able to be at Adobe and exposed to so many different workflows and systems and processes and talent has really opened my eyes to the industry. And that the industry, every pocket works slightly differently. They all have different DAMs, MAMs. They all have slightly different metrics that they're trying to do. But a lot of the problems that they're trying to solve are all very similar, and the types of benefits that they can achieve from this is all very similar. Like a lot of these individuals that I consult with is that if you like, if we're breaking it down, so if you can create a 3D asset, apparel, footwear, a golf club, whatever it might be, if you can get that asset at a grade A digital virtual twin, you can reduce the samples of that product by 80%
Mhm.
just by that.
Yeah.
And so we saw that explicitly at Nike. And so, as an example, I was working with an incredible, talented designer on my team on this incredibly complex bra design. And what was happening was this was a brand new innovation in the world, didn't exist anywhere. The technology was new to Nike. It was a truly new innovation. And they had been trying to design this and get it manufactured for the last year. And they were not able to accurately communicate the design intent to our manufacturing partners. And so they were going through dozens and dozens of iterations trying to get this right. And each time that they would go through this iteration process, they'd have to create a new mold. And this new mold would be $1,000 plus. So it's expensive. You got the designer side, the manufacturer, you got so much time that they were bleeding hundreds
Yeah.
of thousands of dollars. And so we sat with them and we said, okay, walk us through what's the problem, what's the pain points, what are you trying to solve, the basic business development cycle. And so we looked at this and we said, hey, I think Substance Painter and being able to do this parametrically and have these renders and simulations and glow and that sort of thing is going to solve your entire problem. But this is going to speed us up. And so we did that. And within 2 weeks, we had the prototype out to her. She did all the designs. And then she was able to move so quickly in that 3D phase that she was able to come up with the next design iteration within a week. Something that would take a month of approvals and iterations and
Wow.
all that crazy stuff. So it was amazing. But not only that, we were able to, she sent us back the file. We kicked out the turntables, animations, simulations. We sent that to the manufacturing partner. Within a month, the very first attempt that they had nailed the design, something that they were unable to do for an entire year. They were able to do on the first go. And then we were able to launch that product. And that's what I'm saying. If you can have that accurate digital representation, which does cost more. It does can take more time, but that iteration cycle that you save is just phenomenal. And so that is a very tangible example of the benefit of being able to iterate and design, especially parametrically in 3D. And now we were able to use that asset for renders, internal design reviews, external agencies, manufacturing. You can even, if you start looking at these in footwear and apparel and other objects, you can then use these in games and immersive experiences. And there's so many benefits to this.
That's amazing. I was thinking like time to market cut down to like 25%, like basically what you said earlier, do things in a week that would take a month. It's really interesting to hear that take. But then also I can see how there are problems because you want to get that buy-in from leadership, and leadership should say, wow, this is amazing. We are 4 times faster. We save so much money. And it's not like
Mhm.
that, like you said, the $1,000 on a physical prototype. That's like a very obvious saving, but that's not really what it is. It's about the faster time to market and saving all that team time that can design 4 times as much now, basically. And but why do organizations then still often struggle with introducing these workflows? I can see that they're very different. That's the superficial answer, but I think we were tapping into these aspects now already. So what's your take on that? Why are some stuck maybe or not getting there
Yeah.
as quickly as they want to? And where can you guys help?
Yeah. Again, a fantastic question. And so, as a setting place, as a foundation, 70% of digital transformation initiatives fail. So, that's a research fact. And I think a lot of it has, especially in the 3D world, has to come down to the leadership that's in place not fully understanding the complexity of the pipeline. And so, especially in the 3D world, it's a very interesting space where, in general, a lot of the leadership that I see at Nike and other major companies are those divisions are led by business leaders. So MBAs that have a very strong background in finance or operations. So they're very operationally minded. But 3D, AI, these technologies are so deep and so complex. And again, going back to the iceberg, you see the visual of it, and that's just a tiny piece of everything that goes behind it. And so it's really hard for them to truly wrap their hands around everything. Now, conversely, a lot of these individuals that do come from this very heavy 3D background love to create. They love to design. They did not go to school to get an MBA, to become a manager, to do this leadership thing. And so now you have these two very distinct skill sets that typically don't meet in the middle. And that
Mhm.
causes a lot of friction in these teams because you have this very frustrated creative base that doesn't know how to effectively communicate to their leadership team. And the leadership team doesn't know how to effectively communicate down and work together to solve these very complex projects. And so the teams tend to spin and they tend to overpromise and these teams get strapped and the expectations on the creatives become so monumentous. And especially in these larger companies, the designers are working across 3, 4 seasons. So they don't have the time to learn these new tools. And they don't have the luxury of being able to be like, oh, I'm just going to stop for 2 weeks and learn how to model in Blender or learn how to
Right.
do this in Substance. And so there's this friction between the two worlds that most companies are unable to traverse. And the companies that are able to traverse that and figure out how those teams can work together and how you can up level these incredible creative designers into leadership positions and give them the proper training to learn how to lead and manage have absolutely the most success. They're able to work through these really complex problems. And additionally, a lot of these tech teams, because when you enable these 3D platforms and processes, you have a very heavy tech dependency. So you need automations, you need dams, you need all of these other resources, or even being able to create a configurator. And a lot of these tech teams are extremely talented engineers, but again, they don't have that 3D background. So they don't really understand the best ways that a user would want to work with the software. And so they create the software how they feel that it would be best used of how their brains work. And a creative's brain is just so fundamentally different in how we
Mhm.
operate that I've seen time and time again of all these internal tools being developed, hundreds of thousands of dollars poured into them and not get adopted because
Mm.
it doesn't meet the user needs. And so there's just those bridges between the engineering tech, the leadership. If you can figure out those how those teams can effectively work together, you just can get just the craziest speed and velocity in what you're able to achieve.
That's amazing. That's really where the magic happens, right? Like in the middle. I
Mhm.
can totally see that from both sides. I'm now in a leadership role, but I have a like more bottom up tech background, and also as a tech person, right? Be the 3D artist or programmer, you usually don't have a good clue about why is your business doing this or what does it mean to shorten the time to market by factor X. So then what's your approach? So concretely speaking, when someone says that we somehow know that there's like gold in this 3D stuff and the digital twins and what these guys are talking about, but how do we, how can I, if I'm in the middle management, let's say, and I'm not C-level, so I need to convince people that I'm working for and I have teams that are working for me. Like, how can I start? What's your recommendation if you have any to share?
Yeah. I do. Because I lived that. Nike being a manager and then a director, I was very squarely in that middle management position. And that historically, just across all industries, is the hardest position to be
Oh
in
yeah.
because you're sandwiched between the two groups. And so The things that I found that really helped me was especially having to learn all this myself because I didn't go to business school. So I didn't, the being able to speak the big business language, I had to learn. So my advice would be don't boil the ocean. So that's what that's the trouble that I got into all the time was I was like, hey, imagine we could do this and this and this, and like all this would be automated, amazing. It'd completely overwhelm them. Or worse, they buy into it, and then now you singularly are on the hook for everything. So not a good position either way to be in. So my advice is you start with a very core problem. So you as a
Right.
designer or as a manager know this intimately, the problems, the challenges your team is facing. You also hear from the leadership of the challenges, the KPIs that they're trying to chase after and obtain. And so now you need to come up with a plan to figure out, okay, let's take on one challenge. If that's a 3D prototype, if that's a colorway, if that is a season, a product, whatever that is. And then working with your leaders and start saying, okay, I'm identifying these business problems and I'm identifying these gaps and these things are happening. Are you saying the same thing? And if you can get that alignment with them of saying, of having them say, yes, those are problems, those are the things that we're trying to solve, then you can start positioning them saying, okay, hey, if we can solve that, or if we can get you 50% of the way there, or 10% faster to market, whatever those metrics are on a very small prototype, would that be worth investment? Would that be worth further exploration? And typically the answer to that is going to be some sort of form of yes. And so in that very beginning stage, it's all about trying to de-risk the situation for your leaders. So if you can give them a win, completely in the best case scenario, remove all the risks from them. So there's no blowback, there's no political sabotage, there's
Right.
no money, then there's really no risk for them. There's no loss for them. And so you'll find that tend to have a great degree of freedom to be able to try these different pilots. And the beginning is going to be terrible. It's going to be long hours. It's going to be hard work. It's going to be frustrating. There's a lot of pain that comes with that. But if you can prove that in a pilot in a small sense and prove the ROI that you were talking about and connect it to the business KPIs, the business metrics, what they care about, and be able to speak to that in the business language, then the chances are you're going to have an incredible success in being able to move that forward. And if you start small, then it's going to be more manageable for you to be able to take on that short period of time to in order to get funding and buy-in and improve it. But really it's just taking off a small piece, proving it, de-risking it, and then being your best advocate and showing the results. And that is going to get the most consistent, although a bit slower results that you can then build off of and then just a hockey stick movement up.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. And like showing that value by starting with something like a POC, right, is I
Mhm.
feel usually the only way, unless you convince someone at C level and they're really sold and they really say, okay, I don't want to half-ass this, let's go all in. But yeah, do you see this? Really, my last question on this one. I think it's very interesting. Do you see basically a fundamental issue that we also cannot solve like perfectly between the need to show that this is just like the tip of the iceberg and to leverage the digital twin to its full extent, we need to have like very pervasive 3D digital twins
Mhm.
versus not wanting to boil the ocean and like starting with a small POC because yeah, you can show the return, but it's wow, I make this big initial effort to create this 3D thing and I know I could do a zillion things with it, but now I make a big effort to do one thing with it. And then you know what I'm saying? A
Yeah,
little bit
I
of
know
friction
exactly what you're
between
saying. And so
long-term benefit and
the
short-term
challenge
effort.
is like what you're talking about is, in my mind, the right way to do it. If you can get the whole picture, like it is the most effective way. However, it doesn't work for middle management
Right.
because they don't typically have the record of a track record. They're not at the C level. They don't have the budget, the influence. They don't have all the things. So typically, a C level executive could be like, "Hey, I've got this amazing idea. I'm going to paint this beautiful picture for you. We can stand up this entire org, do this amazing thing." And they've got all those things going for them. And so if they can speak that language, then the rest of the C-suite typically would be like, yeah, let's do a small pilot, let's fund it, let's go through that big vision. But the middle management doesn't have all that going for them. So they have a lot more going against them. That makes it harder for the leaders above them to be able to buy into that larger picture. And so there's definitely a balance in there. And having a endpoint or your end goal vision, but not having be that thing that you focus on and just having the small incremental win. So you get that win, you get the money, you build off of that, and then everything keeps going to that vision. So you do, to your point, especially even as manager, you have to have that end goal vision. There's got to be a North Star you're pointing to where everything is headed. And then you just start at that beginning. Maybe depending on your leadership, the politics, all those things, you paint a little bit of that picture of where you're going so people get a sense of it. But then you really focus just on that proving the RI and your business leadership skills as well, because that typically is a huge unknown. If you're in that middle management, you don't have a ton of experience of leading these massive long-term, multi-year, multifunctional projects. And so it allows you to really build up that credibility and get that visibility cross-functionally to a lot of different leaders. And that's really that point that you're going to be dealing with. But yeah, if you were more at that C-suite level, like that vision painting, and that if you were a startup and you're going to get seed money, like you are painting that vision for all your investors. You are painting all the what ifs and how we can monetize and the
Right.
billion-dollar plans. That's what you do.
But we see like many early adopters like getting great ROI and like great results. And so I'm just wondering, so if we look ahead, if we like for now don't think about the corporate environment, but just like the benefits of this technology, and then also things like AI, right? Like what happened in the past couple of years, that we get amazing opportunities like through new technology, but also a lot of insecurity and things that we haven't figured out yet and how to deal with them. What's your vision like looking ahead on a little bit into the future of digital twins or virtual twins?
Yeah. Yeah. This is it. We are in this fundamental shift, bigger change in the way we interact with the world, design that we've ever experienced is happening right now. Even in my mind, this is a bigger change than the invention of the internet. The impact and the good and the bad and everything in there is just going to be so much greater than I think any of us can really consider right now because of just the amount of potential in here. And related to the 3D design, the digital twin, virtual twin capabilities, like I'm really seeing like the idea of leaving this CAD era behind and entering more of a system era of living models and having these models being able to be modified, adapted, designed, changed without human interaction, and being able to have these AI models, even we're not there yet, but being able to have these AI models consistently and constantly design these 3D models, adapt these models, and being able to do that based off of real-time data, costing, material information, trends, whatever those things might be. And then we'll be able to just dial in these design parameters with sliders, the density, elasticity, carbon score. We'll be able to get to a point where we can do all this ever before a gram of resin is ordered. And we're going to be able to start designing these things and saying, hey, instead of AI, draw me a swoosh, it's going to be, hey, solve for 30% lighter with net zero impact and show the trade-offs. And then it's going to design the shoe and it's going to update it. And then it's going to have these things the industry go. And a lot of these old, more archaic file formats, I feel that is going to be an industry that's ripe for disruption. And we see like NVIDIA's neural shaders, they're synthesizing lighting, textures, microgeometry on the fly. And so we're seeing a lot more of these things starting to adapt of what is a 3D model, what is a 3D asset, what is that file format. We got nerfs and we got Gaussian splats, we got all these things that are really starting to disrupt the industry of how we design, how we create, and how we perceive. And even looking way forward, even looking at brain computer interfaces, neural links, right? And so if we have in the future, if there's this huge surge in that technology and people are like, yes, that's exactly what we want, that is going to unlock a completely different experience for these virtual assets, because not only will we be able to put on the VR gear, but if we have something that's connecting it into our brain, that is going to fundamentally change how our brain is going to perceive that environment, to the effect of not being able to tell the difference between that and the real world. And so if it's communicating to our brain and saying, hey, I want you to perceive this thing as real, or like when you're holding the shoe, I want you to perceive all the bumps on the outsole. I want you to perceive what the textures on the tongue feel like and like the smell of it. Like that is going to fundamentally change the entire design ecosystem from just being something that we aesthetically to look at to an entire experience. But then that really changes this entire design paradigm from visual to an experience. And not just, oh, this is a great VR experience, but like a truly human experience of, wow, I imagine what I would feel like wearing and running in that shoe down the street, and it was amazing. I'm going to buy that shoe. And like that's going to be in the future. I don't know if it's going to be 5 years, 10 years, but that is the future that we're looking at, and changing this from like just designing the shoe to designing an experience.
Yeah, latest when we're talking about BCIs, then at some point the way you described it, we're actually blurring the lines between virtual and real. It becomes philosophical. If my brain tells me that I'm smelling something, is that real or is that virtual? But yeah, I can totally see, like you said, like in the near future, even, right? Like things that will improve the product design process, right? Like when you know the coming back to the beginning of the episode, right? That digital
Mhm.
twin or virtual twin actually is ideally connected to maybe your ERP system or whatever. And it's okay, we want to create this thing this season, and we know we have so many of these things on stock. And if this should be like $5 cheaper than the current design, how can the AI just modify it in such a way that something reasonable comes out for my target audience at this
Mhm.
right price? And like instead of iterating for weeks, maybe it needs 20 minutes and then it gives me 5 different proposals or so. That's like totally in front of our eyes. That's happening in a way, like right now already starting
Yeah, yeah,
to get
exactly.
there.
And going off of that idea, all that is going to be define once the companies are able to effectively track and contain that data and know how to properly use it, that's going to launch that off. And then designers are going to really go from like doing the initial designs to more like curating and looking at the
Hmm.
millions of options that AI is going to, and curating it down. And that's going to have a really interesting impact into the design community, because that has a potential to really remove the need to have that middle talent layer of designers. But that leaves a huge question mark for those middle designers, and even a bigger question mark of how do you, in this world, go from a junior designer to get the skills, the experience to become an expert, to know what sells, to know what. So I think even like the training and design programs are going to be fundamentally shifting under these new paradigms as AI and 3D continue to advance, to bridge that gap and know what our relation is with this design and how it takes place and where we fit in and what is the most effective ways to use this new technology. Because like for me, like I love using AI to remove and reduce the redundancy and the repetitive tasks and those things that I don't like to do. But I still want to be able to leverage my design eye and my experience of the world to be
Oh
able
yeah,
to
totally.
inform the design to know what I believe is going to perform the best. And like right now, that's a really beautiful sort of relationship with AI and being able to co-create. And it'll be really interesting to see how that evolves over time. And if will AI at some point be able to have a better design sense than myself, right?
Yeah, and it definitely doesn't get boring. So that's super exciting to even think about that and write and be on the pulse of these things, just like you are. So following you on LinkedIn and elsewhere, and like just hearing from you, like how you talk about these kind of things, it's just super exciting to be together in this space and just follow it
Mhm.
from 3D digital twins to AI and the combination of these kind of things. So if we would wrap this up and give our audience like one key insight that we want them to walk away with. Do you have something in mind? Like what would be one thing that you really want our listeners to walk away with and maybe think about?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, especially in this digital twin world, I have a huge heart and love for the that middle management layer in this, to see the benefit, who are struggling day in and day out to be able to revolutionize the companies from the inside out and do that. And just leaving you with the thought of, you're right, this is hard. It is an extremely challenging position to be in. And that fight that you're fighting is so worth it. It is fundamentally just personally, business, ROI, everything in there is so worth what you are trying to do. And the technology there has never been in a better place to be able to do it. And the thought there is continue to push, leverage some of this insights, the advice in here. Reach out to me if you've got questions or want to shoot the breeze or anything like that. But do not get behind in technology. It is so hard as a designer in the space to just create the content, to be able to hit the deadlines and not be able to have the time to do anything else or even risk burnout. And my challenge is just do anything that you can to continue to stay on this technology, whether it's AI or 3D, continue to learn, continue to be curious, because this world is just evolving at such an incredible pace that if you get left behind, it's really hard to understand what is the right solution and what is the right thing to be able to implement for your business to be able to grow. Like right now, there's very few people that can articulate the benefits between Nerf and Gaussian splats and when to use what. And so being able to do that and articulate it to your business leaders is such a incredibly important skill that you don't want to have drop in the craziness of your life.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And yeah, thank you so much for the really great takeaway here. So it fits very well. Also for me, it's like why we're here, right? Staying curious, learning together, and like being a part of this amazing world that's evolving and seeing where it takes us and shaping that together. Many thanks, Jonathan, for your time. It was really great having you on the show. I also want to thank everyone who was listening. When you're in that middle management, we hope it really encouraged you to keep pushing. And if you want to learn more, check out podcast.rapidpipeline.com, where you can find everything about the Virtual for Real podcast. Find us on Spotify, Apple, and on all the good podcast platforms, including YouTube. If you liked this episode and the podcast, give us a good review. We'd be super happy. And Jonathan, thanks again for being on the show and looking forward to staying connected in the future.
Yeah, thank you. It was all my pleasure.